You?
You might see me choke.
It's okay.
I mean, you already did, so.
Yeah. You might see me actually choke. So.
Bring some drama to the show.
Oh my god. I was watching the Kyle Rittenhouse trial yesterday.
Oh, I just saw clips of him crying and I couldn't.
It's an act. It's annoying. It is.
Blood.
Yeah.
It's a jury trial, which means he just has to get the jury to feel bad.
You said blood, right?
Yeah.
I heard, see, that's what I heard, so I keep saying that. I just say blood, if that's what you
We can
you're
hear
more familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from now on, I'll say blood.
Okay.
That's interesting. That
At one point, the judge started yelling at Rittenhouse's lawyer.
Oh my god.
It was good.
Go.
Montreal has been listed as one of the top 10 best cities in the world, according to the annual Time Out Index 2021, taking the place at number 6. But is it really the best and most accessible city for all? Today on Local 514, we'll be discussing disabilities, ableism, and how the government of Quebec is supporting those living with disabilities. I'm Savannah Craig. Video journalist Aude Simon spoke with Alicia Ann Pauld, a content creator and disability activist, on invisible and visible disabilities and the normalization of able-bodiedness. Let's take a look at the clip.
Definitely. I think invisible disabilities are not talked enough about. I know personally a year and a half ago, because my disability is progressive, my disability was mostly invisible. It was invisible for the majority of my life. And it was something that I could hide, that I definitely hid in the year before I came out to the people around me and online. And I think people just assume that everybody is by default able-bodied, which is a really wrong way to look at that, because able-bodiedness is not, and the lack of like mental health issues is not the default way of being human. Is just one of the many ways to be human. And when we take that for granted, it's very easy to just rule out people who have more invisible disabilities. I personally make it a point to include those because they are disabilities and their needs need to be fulfilled just as much as mine or any other person's. And I think a lot of this conversation ties also very well with what in English a lot of people call special needs, right? And this idea that like, oh, you need an elevator, you're special. No, I just need to get into places, right? If I have a house with 2 levels and I rip away the stairs, you can't go up there either. Is that a special need? No, you need equipment like to go places, And so the fact that we see stairs as being a norm and just being like, well, duh, everybody needs stairs. No, if I take it away, you can't go there either. If I'm in a classroom and I'm a blind teacher and I decide that my class is going to be pitch black because it doesn't really matter to me, well, having light is a special need. You need light to write down and to see what you're writing. That's a special need. But of course, people would never frame it as that, right? They would just say, no, like needing light is just the standard. No, it's not. So it's like, we really need to change the way that we address those things. And when it comes to invisible disabilities, I feel like a lot of able-bodied people think that these people are on their side. And it's like, no, they're also in the fight. They're also fighting for the rights of their community. And if anything, they're on our side. And we're going to try and fix this thing all together. And so I think it's definitely important not to forget those people because their needs, again, need to be respected just as much as everybody else.
I'm pleased to be joined by Avi Karp, a representative for people with disabilities for the Young Democrats of Quebec. Avi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. So you've been living with MS, which is a disability that is not always visible to some, and it's sometimes invisible. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Right, so MS, for one, it's the most common neurological disease in Canada, and it's actually most prevalent here in Canada. So it affects roughly 90 to 100,000 Canadians. Quick aside, that is also the amount of people needed to have a constituency in federal politics. So most constituencies have around 90,000 people. So if all the people with MS were to be together, they would have their own member of parliament. So it is quite common. In terms of it being invisible, that is also very true, especially in the earliest stages of MS. So you will see things like cognitive difficulties, which come with memory recall, which come with choosing your words, even things like I already said memory recall. So you can see I'm experiencing it right now, but brain fog is a big thing that a lot of us get. We call it cog fog, because cognitive function is a fog. You can also you ever see someone walking down the street drunk, or they at least look like they're drunk? Mm-hmm. That could be caused by MS, when your gait is really off, like your gait's being the way you walk, when your balance is off, when you are unable to, let's say, see properly. It's happened to me where my eyes were so weak that they weren't able to focus. It's invisible. You were to look at me and go, you don't look like anything's wrong with you, but what I was experiencing was clearly anything but that. And there are, like I said, there are a lot of people with MS as well as other diseases. So invisible illness is a great way to explain that. I would take diabetes, for example. You don't know someone's diabetic until they, one, tell you, or two, pull out the thing to jab their finger. But they're still diabetic outside of that window. They're still sick, whether you want to believe it or not.
So you were diagnosed at actually 12 years old, and you've told me that this has affected the process of you getting your medication essentially funded by the government. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Right. So I was diagnosed at 12 years old, which was quite, I don't want to say spectacular, remarkable, because it's not an illness that usually affects children as young as 12. Usually 20 to 40 years old is when you get hit with it. So diagnosed at 12 comes with its own set of problems, which we can explore later if you'd like. But to get onto the medication question, I was explaining that there's the medication itself to treat the MS, which is to slow down the disability phases, or the demyelination on the brain. And then there's the illnesses. There is the medications used to treat the symptoms of the illness. So think muscle pain, think spasticity, think fatigue. So those are covered like any other medication. They're partially covered by the RAMQ. And the difference is for you to pay. But the problem is when you have a bunch of them, think antidepressants, because let's be honest, most Canadians have some kind of mental disorder, depression, anxiety, and about half of people with MS face clinical depression. So it is quite common. So you have that. You have muscle relaxers. You have things for nerve pain. It adds up. So what I am paying a month is like 80 to $100 a month, and that's notwithstanding extras. Think when I have to go buy Tylenol because of a headache. Think if I need Pantaloc for heartburn. All these other medications don't even get counted into that $80. And then I was also talking about the medication used to treat the MS itself. I can tell you in my case, which is Mavenclad, which is a drug used for leukemia. It's a chemotherapy. That costs upwards of $10,000 a year. I don't pay for it. What happens is the drug company has to consult with the doctor, so the doctor can argue with the RAMQ to try to prove that I need it.
Is that a tedious process in itself?
It takes time. So I just started it about a week ago for my next cycle of drugs, which are in January of 2022.
Okay. And what did it kind of look like? Like, when did you start, I guess, seeing the doctor to try and
realize a part of healthcare. The doctor has to trust you just as much as you trust them. Because especially in my case, when they're dealing with muscle relaxants and hardcore drugs, they have to trust that Avi is not going to abuse that privilege. So I have to prove to the doctor that I am of sound mental state, so he or she can fight properly for me on my behalf.
okay, and maybe those who have like a history with substance abuse, like there'll be even more barriers for them to actually access
Exactly.
these type of medications. Are there certain medications that you can recall that are covered by the government compared to ones that aren't, not just specific to MS, but other disabilities?
So I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I think there are so many drugs available for so many different disabilities. Even if you go to the mental health routes and try to take something like Prozac for depression, that is covered, but only to a certain extent.
Okay.
You still have to pay the difference of what the RAMQ decided they're going to cover, because there's also if you look at the receipts when you buy any medication, you'll see a deductible, you'll see the copay, you'll see all these fancy words, which means the government's not paying for it, but you are, the patient.
I guess I kind of want to draw from that and mention something that you spoke to me about earlier this week when we were preparing for this show, in that you need to make under a certain amount of money to be able to get benefits, whether it's your medication provided by the government or other type of things. Can you discuss this a little bit and what this looks like if you make over a certain amount of money?
Right. So I can tell you that because I'm trying to get on disability as we speak, right? And even the social worker that was assigned to me said you'd probably get about $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. How am I supposed to do anything first off? But I'm not going to discuss that right away, because there is an option to be able to supplement your income, but only by a little bit, and it's heavily accounted for. So if they see that you worked 16 hours instead of 15 like you're allowed to, they claw back the money that you earned that you weren't allowed to.
Oh, wow.
So whereas the government, whether it is federal or provincial, is legislating you into poverty. Because if either I can be a good little boy and pull myself up by the bootstraps and get back to work, or I can actually look and realize the real obstacles that are presented by being disabled, and I'm punished for it by $1,000 a month.
You need to make under 16,000 a year. Is that right?
I believe so, because $16,000 a year is the cutoff for where you're not paying income taxes.
Okay. And you also mentioned to me earlier that you constantly have to prove you're disabled enough. Can you tell me a little bit about what this means exactly?
Right. So I can tell you, in the sense of the social aspect, if I walk onto a crowded bus and I need a seat, you know what the first reaction is? Everyone goes, no one wants to look at you, first off. And then if I don't have my cane, no one's gonna believe me because it's invisible, right? I still have leg pain. It's still there whether or not I have the cane. And I went as far as to get a tattoo with the handicapped symbol, to be able to prove to people that I am disabled enough. And this presents itself also as I've had teachers call me out in front of the whole class, saying, "You don't have MS. You're a liar." I've had federal services be denied because I am not disabled enough. Notably, the disability benefits for children, I did not qualify. I was not disabled enough.
Okay.
So if we take, because it's on Concordia University television, so if we take the example of school, you have to go at first. You go through a whole process. Your doctor has to examine you, and then you speak to the school, and then they're going to try to negotiate with you. But if what I don't understand is, if we place so much importance on a doctor's note to have it not be respected, why do we have the doctor's note?
Ultimately, do you think that circumstances like this stem from ableism? Definitely.
Ableism it's not new. It's a new word, but it's not new. I made the comparison to not the chapel, but the oratory, St. Joseph's Oratory, and now you go on this crutches all along the wall. Now, were people more willing to accept divine intervention than to accept help, or to even request help, or to receive help from the state? That's what I'm thinking about when I see this. I don't see miracles being cured. I'm looking at people who have no other means, who are not able to receive the help they need, so that they accept divine intervention, which, frankly speaking, we know it's like, if we look at someone like Mother Teresa, that's miraculous. It's divine intervention. So why are we more quick to go to divine intervention than we are to go to actually help the people now when they need it? We have the ability. We are one of the richest countries in the world. We can do this. A UBI, for example, universal basic income, it's already being done in Alaska. Alaska does it. It would be cheaper than what we have now.
You also mentioned to me that there's this common misconception that things are just free for disabled folks. Could you kind of debunk that?
Yes, and it's actually a misconception that applies to the Indigenous people as well. The status card. You walk into a future shop, show your status card, you walk out with a laptop. Doesn't work that way. Even if I walk in and show my tattoo, it's not free. I still got to pay for it. And I'm paying for that out of the meager sums that are provided for me, or that I'm able to work for. So now, because, how do I word this? Being disabled is not a one-time fee. It's an ongoing cost. So similar, like if your rent is, let's say, $700 a month, for us all to go, but so if your rent is $700 a month, that's something you got to pay every month. But imagine if you're disabled on top of that, that's an extra $100, $200, not even counting the changes, the modifications needed to your house. Let's say you have a house with stairs, but you can't walk. You need to find a way to get from upstairs to downstairs. Let's say you need to buy mobility equipment. Let's say you need to buy a wheelchair. You got to pay for that. Sure, you can claim it on your taxes, but you know what the problem with that is? You got to wait till February. If it's January of 2019 and you got to wait till February 2020 to get your returns back, how is that? You're just pushing me more towards the legislated poverty, because that's what it is.
And you know, what kind of barriers do you face in the workplace or have faced in the workplace, maybe in terms of having to convince your boss that you have a disability similar to circumstances at school?
Right. So, because remember I was telling you about my doctor's note. And why is it that whenever I have to use the doctor's note, I have to convince the person I'm giving it to that it's valid? But we've already established, by we I mean myself and the employer.
Yeah.
We've established that the doctor's note is the be all end all. We've established that the doctor's who we're going to listen to. But I still have to convince the employer, the teacher, the whoever, that it's valid, that it's real. I've had employers call me and directly challenge the notes. I've had employers, when I say I need to leave for X, Y reason, try to convince me otherwise. But what people have to realize, and this is able-bodied people and disabled people, because I feel this is something that disabled people harp on themselves a lot for, is you are only as helpful to the company, to the government, whoever you work for, as your body allows you to be. So even if I come to you at let's say 3 hours into an 8-hour shift and I say, Savannah, listen, I'm not feeling well for X, Y, Z reason. I have this doctor note, and you out of some miracle convince me, okay, just stay a bit longer until it becomes harder. It's, the quality of work decreases. Because when you are means testing me, I think we were discussing that before as well. When you're means testing me to prove my disability is real, or for it to get to a point where you believe it to be impacting my work, that is the problem. That is part of the problem. The problem is much larger, just ableism, which is also enforced by the state, by both the federal government and the provincial government. If you look at how the police treat people, I'm so sorry. If you look at how the police treat people with a disability, it's never even thought about. How many times have we seen a paraplegic arrested and put in cuffs, tipped over in the wheelchair? Like, these are videos that exist. It's not a new phenomenon.
So, in the cases where bosses are challenging you on, medical notices from your doctor, like, what is the end all? What have they demanded to see that essentially, makes them stop questioning you if that's happened?
Well, so usually a good boss, if they don't believe your doctor's note, they'll ask for you to go back and get it reaffirmed.
Taking more time out of your
Taking more
schedule.
time, and then these are things I'm not paid for, because most jobs we already know we don't have sick days, or at least fully legislated sick days. So unless you have an insurance, if I had insurance, I wouldn't care. If I had sick days, I wouldn't care, whatever. But when you say, okay, you missed 2 days already, now you have to go back and get another note, or I've even had some some employers look at me and say, we want you in today. That's what it says. They're challenging the doctor's note than what the doctor put down. Because what I've come to realize is when I say our, I mean people. Our labor is what I have to exchange for funds. And when my labor starts to be impacted, when the employer stops having the ability to make money off of me, that's when it becomes a problem.
Have there been any circumstances where, a boss has threatened to fire you or has fired you because you live with MS?
I've been threatened before. I promptly quit that job.
Yeah.
But it's just when people are coming with threats right away, without even, I can tell you in this case, I gave them documents to read. I gave them the website to the MS Society, and she said, no, you got to do it or else you're fired. And you have to make a complaint with the CNESST. And then I also went a step further and made a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal of Quebec.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the tribunal told me it wasn't the case, but the CNESST did side with me.
Okay. And I guess, circumstances like this, it's not just emotionally draining, but it's also probably, or not just physically draining, but it's also probably emotionally draining as well.
Yeah, it is. And especially because we were talking about cognitive difficulties. We're talking about cognitive difficulties, and especially in MS, the brain is altered in more way than just myelination, which means swelling, or demyelination, excuse me, the swelling of the brain. Because as that happens, and my doctors like to use the concept of Montreal, actually, and I think you'll get a kick out of this.
Okay.
So imagine Montreal with no traffic.
Oh.
Incredible.
Hard to imagine.
So that's what your brain looks like.
Okay.
Montreal with no traffic.
Okay.
But then, what if the construction workers come and put up a cone? Does it make a difference? No, you just have to take a detour.
Okay.
May take you a bit longer, but you're going to get there. Hold on your detour, there's another construction cone.
Okay.
And now we close down the whole 40. And these construction cones and these detours keep popping up until we're at the gridlock where we are today. And this is what happens in my brain, where because of the demyelination, you see these neural pathways start to be, I'm going to say, for lack of a better word, destroyed, because they're not able to be used.
Okay. No, it's a good analogy. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I guess I just wanted to mention some provincial news that connects to the issue we're talking about here today. This actually happened this past summer, where Quebec essentially abandoned a pilot project that would take some adults with disabilities out of CHSLDs, adults that are currently living with disabilities, and they're forced to live in CHSLDs in order to have support and care. And this one activist with a disability, he's living with muscular dystrophy. His name is Jonathan Marchand. He's been living in a CHSLD for 10 years. He does not want to live there. So as an act of protest, he spent 5 nights living in a makeshift cage outside of the National Assembly to essentially demand for those who are not elderly and living with a disability to be able to move out of these long-term care homes and have self-directed care instead. So essentially the government had promised a pilot project where 5 adults who are living with disabilities would be able to live at home and manage their own support services. But Marchand actually rejected this proposition, this plan, after he found out that these 5 adults, they would not be living separately. They would actually be put in a group home together. And he essentially says that this is nothing new from what's being already offered. Avi, what are your thoughts on this?
So immediately I'm thinking of bodily autonomy. And that extends beyond being physically disabled. That extends one to the being allowed to do what you want with your body, whether it be go to the mall, because when you go into CHSLD, you become basically a ward of the state. It's their job to care for you. So similarly, how a preschool child cannot walk home, you wouldn't be able to either. Just because you need some help to, let's say, clean yourself, to brush your teeth, to go to the washroom, you have to surrender whatever pride you have left. Not even pride, but just the ability to, like, I'd be able to go to the bank and take out a loan. I'm in a sound mental state, but if you go into a CHSLD, you give that permission to the government. You have to give permission for them to be in charge of you. And the lack of bodily autonomy, which we see a lot, and it's not new for the government to be trying to control certain people's behaviors and aspects of life. Whether you're disabled and just need help to get in the shower, but you're thrown into a CHSLD. Whether you're someone who wants to get parental leave, or even try to get an abortion. That's not something. Whether you're a male who's trying to get a vasectomy, these are things of bodily autonomy, where it is the patient's decision to decide what to do with their life. Like I said, once again, whether it's you're disabled and you're in a CHSLD, you don't need to be in a CHSLD. What's happening is the government is prescribing it to you. They're deciding for you. They're taking away your bodily autonomy.
I just wanted to jump back to someone else we heard from during this episode, Alicia Ann Pauld. She spoke to Ode considering accessibility for those living with disability in regards to shelter, education, food, and social relations. So how can people engage and make our city more accessible? Let's see what she has to say.
Yeah, I would say a big part of physical inaccessibility, and I'll speak specifically for me as someone who has a mobility-related disability. Every time, you see stairs without a ramp or without an elevator, whenever you see even like sometimes ramps without railing on the side to help people go up, and this is mostly like that's the norm in the city. Like if you are in a wheelchair, if you struggle with those types of this type of architecture, you're kept out of a lot of spaces. And I feel like a lot of people take it for granted. And I understand when it's not your reality, you just go up and down the stairs every day and you don't think much of it. But this architecture is one of the bases of, the very deep and serious exclusion that a lot of disabled folks experience on the daily, whether that's just in terms of being able to create social relations with other people, but also, when it comes to being able to have access to certain things. So education, food, housing. Tell me if your best friend's house has an elevator, or yours, or your cousin, whatever. If they don't, that means disabled people cannot have shelter in those spaces, in those buildings, or whatever. And that's a big problem, because aren't we also worthy of having a home, right? So that's definitely one thing. And also how Montreal is really not doing much in terms of changing these things. And that's an issue. We need to be changing this. I always make it a point to say when we are talking about solutions that everyday people, it can, and like even like everyday able-bodied people can potentially feel kind of overwhelmed with when they're being presented just the depth to which the city is inaccessible. And I definitely don't want able-bodied people to feel like, every day that they wake up, this is your fault, that, I am oppressed by the state. But I do think there are things that we can do. And I think a lot of it is just in relations to attitudes, right? The fact that when I was interviewed by Montreal Blog, I want to say last summer, about accessibility, And, someone in the Instagram comments of the post flat out said, well, you can't expect to be accepted everywhere. Like you can't expect like everywhere to be accessible, and it's like, well, why not? How come you can get everywhere and I can't? Why do you think you're more important than me? Why do you think you're entitled to having to be welcomed in spaces and I should just accept being excluded? And when you erase that mindset, when you stop seeing disabled people as entitled for wanting equal rights, that's where we're going to go somewhere. And unfortunately, to be really honest, I feel like a lot of people are just like, yeah, no, it's always going to be like that. So please stop complaining. And that's deeply unfair. But also in terms of things that people can actually do as well, I think just making it a point to making it a point to say that accessibility is important. If you're someone who creates events, right, make sure that you're having that event in a space that is accessible. So much so that eventually all of these few spaces are going to be oversaturated, and non-accessible spaces are going to be like, wait, hold on, like how come nobody is trying to rent our space anymore? What is the difference between us and this other place, right? And we need to force them to accommodate and to become accessible spaces. And that's the only way to do that, to make it a point to say, I don't want to encourage spaces that are pushing people away or that are excluding people. And a lot of people actually do put up events in some way or another, right? And so to make that a point, to say that accessibility is at the top of your list of priority is very important. Also just trying to change your inner dialogues in monologues rather, when it comes to the way that you view disabled people. Engage with the content of disabled content creators. A lot of us are marginalized when it comes to algorithms. A lot of us get shadow banned. A lot of us get our accounts deleted because of trolls and things like that. And also just because of community guidelines of certain platforms like Instagram and TikTok. So if you can donate, if you can give, money to disabled content creators, that's a great thing, especially because a lot of us are financially marginalized because we have to pay so much more than everybody else for everything that we need, whether that's housing, food, transportation. So if you have money to give, or if people are creating content that you're into, subscribe to their Patreon, subscribe to their OnlyFans. I mean, maybe not because OnlyFans kind of wacky now, but you know what I mean? Like there are so many ways you can encourage disabled content creators. And it's through that way as well that we can build a stronger community, because then we get to give back to each other and create more opportunities for all of us to grow.
If you're watching live and you have any comments, want any questions answered, please engage with us in the chat. We'd be happy to answer. Avi, just kind of building off what Alicia Ann was saying, in terms of mobilizing to make Montreal more accessible and maybe kind of, just Canada more accessible. What are things that, voters, citizens of the public, what can we do to push for accessibility and more support for folks with disabilities?
Well, I think first, just everyone knows someone who's disabled. Everyone does. Speak to them. If I'm blind, I'm going to have different asks than someone who is having difficulty walking. Mm-hmm. If I'm deaf, it's going to be different than someone who is autistic or has Down syndrome. It's going to be different from every person. But what I would like to see is, Montreal is a prime example of this. How many metros have an elevator?
Yeah, not many.
Not many. What are you supposed to do if you're a paraplegic? Mm-hmm. Go down the escalator? Mm-hmm. You can't do that.
And that kind of builds back to, what you were mentioning to, taking more time. You have to go to like Barry UCAM, Lean on Gruel, mm-hmm. and then kind of just like rework your route each time.
That's it. And it almost seems to me that we are willing to help solve the problem as long as it doesn't inconvenience those in power. Mm-hmm. Because it would inconvenience the STM. It would. But you know how it would be a convenience for how many Montrealers who who are in a wheelchair, who have a walker, who have a cane. You know, and that's just physical mobility. I was talking about blindness as well. You know, in my portion of the city, we don't have audible clickers. But clickers, I mean to cross the streets.
Yeah.
It's not audible. So we need consistent funding, and we need not an oversight board, because I find many times those positions it's kind of tokenism. Look, we're listening, but they're not in a decision-making position. Give someone who is disabled a position to make a change, and the apparatus is already there. Everyone knows it's there. But once we talk about bringing in a marginalized person at the top of that apparatus, whether it be, she was talking about race relations, whether it be a black person to decide race policy in the United States, for example, they'd rather have a board, or rather have a black cop decide what to do. You know, so these things, sure, it might help a little bit, but it's not gonna achieve the thing that everyone is hoping for. And I bring this up, and I don't bring these things up to escape your question, because it's so intersectional. Because I was listening to her, and you realize she's talking about race relations, and she's also disabled. So imagine, so she's trying to receive, actually, let me find a better example. So we already know the poorest people in society are, one, racialized, are two, disabled. So imagine being both. It's already harder for you from the get-go. It's so intersectional, and people don't realize it. And it's not because they choose not to realize it. But you know what? It's a lot to think about when you think about how every person has it so much difficult in their way.
Thanks, Avi. We'll go back to Alicia and Paul. She was discussing the erasure of disability as a systemic issue, as well as the erasure in education. Let's see what she had to say.
Issues relating to disability are seen as individual issues, meaning it's issues that I'm supposed to deal with as a disabled person, and it's something that able-bodied people have the privilege of, you know, being able to distance themselves from. And I think that's the main mistake we do when we talk about ableism and disability justice, is this idea that these are issues that are my responsibility to fix, when in reality it's able-bodied people who should be fixing the systems, because able-bodied people are the one who created it, right? And who created it in such a way that my people and me could not flourish and thrive at the same level as other people. In terms of education in general and the university scene, I would say it's kind of similar to other issues as well, in the sense that, for example, as a sociology major, there's a class that I'm obligated to take. It's a mandatory class, and it's called Sociological Classical Theory, where you basically learn about the founding fathers of sociology and all of that. And it's a 2 semesters course, and there's 1 week about feminism, and you read like 3 texts that were written by women, and then there's 1 week about like racism, and you read 2 texts by Du Bois, right? And it's like Blackness and womanhood and are so much more than 1 week. Like 1 week's worth of, you know, equivalent into a curriculum, into a syllabus. Being Black is so much more than 2 texts from Du Bois, and being a woman is so much more than 3 texts by other women sociologists. And when it comes to disability, we don't even talk about it a lot of the times. And if you want to hear specifically about disability, you have to take a whole class on it, which currently I don't think Concordia gives, right? So again, it's this same pattern where certain issues are, if you want to hear about those struggles, you need to go look specifically for them and go out of your way. But if you want to read anything written by a white man, you'll be served, right? White men writers are overly represented in our syllabus, I would argue, in every single discipline at Concordia. And the fact that this is still the default is an issue. And when it comes to disabilities, the same thing. Personally, I've read texts about disability in my classes a couple of times. I have noticed though that often those texts are not even mandatory. They'll be in the like suggested readings for a class. They're not going to be talked about in class either. And so it's difficult, especially when, for example, you have to write papers and for example, like professors will ask you to have like class material to support your research, but it's like, what if the things that I want to research are not part of class material because you didn't put them on the syllabus, right? So that's another issue of like, who are the people who are important enough to be mandatory in our syllabus and what type of people are not? You know, who are the suggested readings and who are not even on the syllabus at all? So I think it's a lot of that, and I'm going to stop for now, but it's just, it could be like an hour-long conversation. But at the end of the day, I think the quick answer to this is just ableism and the fact that able-bodied people feel like they have the privilege to distance themselves from disability-related issues.
So, Avi, you had some critiques to say about Concordia buildings. Would you like to share?
Yes, specifically this building, because I'm not a student at Concordia, I don't know all the buildings, but I've been here. And first thing is, there's no elevator. That's what the other commenter was saying. There's no elevator. And then I go, okay, whatever. I only have a cane, so maybe I can walk it up. The stairs are like this. And what floor are we on? The fourth? The fourth? And the stairs aren't even solid. Like this, it's clearly not handicap accessible. And is it done by design? I'm not going that far to say. But you know what? What I will say is that if you bring this to administration and they still choose to not do anything about this, then it is by design. And that is what I mean by the means testing, by the ableism. Because if they were to actually listen to the disabled community, and here look, we have a lot of disabled students who want to go to CUTV, but it's incredibly hard to get up there. Like for me, it felt like I was running a marathon, not because I'm out of shape. I am, but not because of that, but because it requires more energy to move my legs the way I want them to. And then I gotta be worried because we're going up the stairs. So I gotta be worried about my balance. So I'm holding on. This is an aside, but I'm left-handed, so I grab on the left side. Most people come down on the right. So their right would be my left, which means if I want to avoid any awkward mishaps, I gotta stand on the side without the guardrail or the handrail. So there's a lot of things that could be and should be addressed. And if I had it my way, I'd start with this building.
Yeah, that's a good one. Note to the administration, hope one of you is watching. We'll just come back to Paul. Her work is intersectional. So how does police brutality, mental health, Black Lives Matter, and institutional ableism, how do these things correlate? Let's see what she has to say.
I mean, so many, but I guess in terms of a more intersectional lens, the one that jumps to my mind right now would be regarding police brutality. I feel like a lot of people, especially in the wake of the insurgence of Black Lives Matter last summer, there's been just this huge focus on specifically the police violence inflicted onto cisgender heterosexual Black American men. And while I understand that this is obviously a population who is at risk of police brutality, we need to stop pretending that Black women and Black femmes and Black non-binary people are not the victims of police violence, because they sure are. We need to stop pretending that it doesn't happen in Canada. And we also need to stop pretending that disabled people are not increasingly more likely to be victims of police brutality. Studies in the States show that potentially like 2/3 of the people who are murdered by the police in the States every year have some type of disability, whether that's comprehension related, obviously physical, everything surrounding mental health issues. And we've seen it even here in Montreal. The Black man recently who got killed by the police during a mental crisis episode. This is disability issues, right? And especially recently, I've had conversations on Twitter about this topic of people making fun of people with disabilities and just of people's abilities in general. And when you bring that up, when you tell people, as a Black person, you cannot be ableist and support Black Lives Matter, because so many of the people who die from police brutality are disabled in one way or often many others. And so if you want to have Black Lives Matter in your mouth, you cannot be ableist. And there's no other, there's no way around that. And so, and just in general, like if you want to uplift Black lives, if you want to protect Black lives, it has to be all Black lives, right? And I feel like a lot of people are trying to cut corners, as if the very founders of this movement didn't make it a point when they started this to say, this is not just for cishet Black men, this is for Black trans women, this is for Black non-binary people, this is for Black queer people, this is for disabled people, right? This is for poor people, this is for mad people, this is for all people who are Black. And it really irritates me to see how so many people want to make this fight about them and nobody else. And again, obviously I'm talking here about able-bodied, cisgender, heterosexual Black men. Especially when, and I can attest to this as an organizer, right? And especially as someone who is literally involved and who works for Black Lives Matter Canada, the people who are around this table are not cisgender, heterosexual Black men. The people feeding our communities are not cisgender, heterosexual Black men. The people getting people out of jail are not cisgender, heterosexual Black men. They're not, right? It's non-binary people. It's queer men. It's Black women of all sexual orientations and, gender variation. Like, it's not the men who are the loudest about wanting to exclude others from this movement. So I would say that's definitely the main point I want to make when it comes to intersectionality and myths. And I guess, the myth here is that Black Lives Matter is not just for cishet Black men. It's simply not, and it cannot be.
Earlier, Avi spoke about how it's difficult to get on disability, but it's also easy to have disability revoked. Alicia Ann discusses Canada's conditionality of support. Let's see the clip.
Disabled people have to pay more for housing, for example, because if you need to live in a building with an elevator, usually those are bigger taller buildings and with more resources and whatnot. Even if you don't use those resources, you're going to be paid for them. Me personally, I pay more for rent than almost all of my friends because I need to live in a building that's accessible to me. And my apartment is so much smaller than all of my friends as well. But also it's there's nowhere else for me to live, this is my only option. And it's one of the cheapest option, but I know for a fact that a lot of people could not even live where I live because it's not even that accessible either. But anyways, housing. And yes, if you are a student, you can get financial aid when it comes to the housing that you get. However, it's really not that much money. It's really, really, really not that much money. It's not enough to help anyone at all. In fact, it's honestly kind of insulting how low it is. I talked about this when I was a guest on the Woke or Whatever podcast at the beginning of the year, but before living in the apartment that I lived in now, the financial support that I was receiving from the government to pay my apartment was exactly $1 a month. After a whole year, I received a check of $12. So who does that help? I would like to know. But yeah, so that's definitely a thing. And when you ask the government, when you ask people, how come I don't get help to pay for this when it's not even my fault, you know, they don't have an answer for you. So there's definitely that. When it comes to transportation, I know personally I've been paying so much money in Ubers lately because taking public transportation is very difficult for me because of how inaccessible it is, but also just because of the way my body is and the things that I can and cannot do. Um, and when you want to, for example, like apply for adapted transport, there's just so much bureaucracy. It is such a long process. The criteria are so like specific and hard, I guess, hard to fulfill. There are so many what I personally would call shady questions about basically asking you, have you done something to help your case? Like, have you tried being less disabled, please? Because we don't want to give that service to you, which is so insulting. Like, there's nothing I can do. This is just the way that my body is. And even if there was, it's like, how is that your business? Aren't like you're not my doctor. You do not know why I have the time or the money to pay for certain types of certain type of services or help or whatever. Like this is none of your business. Just come and pick me up at my place and bring me where I need to go. Right. So yeah, even when there are these certain types of help in place that are less expensive, because adaptive transport is less expensive than like paying for an Uber everywhere you go. There's so much barriers to make that economy so difficult to access. Again, when it comes to food, if you can't go to the grocery store and you need to be delivered, you need to pay for the delivery fee. You need to, tip the people who come to your house to bring it to you, and you're not reimbursed in any way for these expenses. And so, yeah, it's all of these things that require us. Also, mobility aid, if you need a wheelchair, you can get a bit of that reimbursed to you by the government, but barely. If it breaks, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get another wheelchair back or whatever. In certain instances, if it breaks, for example, if it breaks on an airplane, because you can't get onto an airplane in a wheelchair, if the employee break it, it's your problem. They're not going to give you a cent for that. So it's all of these things that require us to pay so much money to be alive, and we have close to no help, to no financial help to cover those fees. And yet we're still expected to be happy for the bare minimum. It's the second that you sign a lease with somebody. So even if, you're in a relationship with someone, you sign a lease with them, but you're not married. If you live with someone for more than 4 months, you're considered to be married under the law, which is only a rule that applies specifically to disabled people who get financial aid from the government. Other than that, that does not work. Nobody is considered married by the law if they live with someone. Because that makes no sense. But that's what happens with us, because the state is so eager to take away the money that they give us, which, by the way, is so minimal, is so small. It is basically so small and hard to obtain. And it's that way because they don't want us to have access to it. They don't want us to apply for it, right? And so I know personally, I'm privileged in the way that I don't anticipate having to ask for that type of aid from the government, but also I don't even know if I would be eligible to that because there's so many loopholes. You basically cannot own anything. In certain cases, people, because wheelchairs are extremely expensive, even having a wheelchair makes you uneligible, because they're like, well, if you had $30,000 for a wheelchair, you don't need financial aid. It was like, well, yeah, I do actually. That's the whole point, right? So it's the way that all of this is set up is to make it so difficult for us to have access to that help that we don't take it. And I mean, we could go down a very dark rabbit hole of how that's like basically semi-passive eugenics, but we're not going to go there because it's sunny outside. But it's just, I really want people to understand that if you think and I guess that's another myth as well. If you think that disabled people are actually helped in this country, you could not be more wrong, because every single drop of help that we get has to be cried for, worked for, bled for, and it is so easy to be taken away.
So Avi, before we end the show, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with us today?
Yes. I got to end it on a positive note. So, being disabled, in my case, like, it has taken things away from me. It's taken away my mobility. It's taken away my bladder control. It takes things away. But what have I gained from it? I've gained friends. I've gained a new outlook on life. I've gained a purpose in life. Because, if I wasn't disabled, I wouldn't be taking this political course. I like to tell people, it's nice. People tell me I take politics too seriously, but I say it's nice that you don't have to. So I was thrust into this, and luckily it's something I love doing. So there are goods that come with any diagnosis. Whether it's whatever, like if you are disabled, it is not a death sentence. Just like how you can find love at 50, it is not. There's no predetermined, almost a schema, a set that disabled people have to follow through. Because I'm disabled, I've got an extra 5 years of getting married. I get an extra 5 years of getting my dream job. Life is life for all of us. So I think I'm gonna leave it on. When you see a disabled person, the worst thing you can do is pity. I'm so sorry. The worst thing you can do is pity. Don't look at someone and go, "Oh, you're so strong. Oh, I feel so bad. You have one leg." No, talk to them up here, because they're likely trapped in their body. Because that's how I feel. I'm trapped in my body. So if you want to make a difference, it starts by going to the nearest disabled person you know and asking, "Hey, how are you?" And that's all you have to. Let them do the talking. Listen, we don't want someone to fight our battles for us. We want someone to be an ally. And that's it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Avi. It's
No
such a
worries.
pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning in. To keep up to date with the newest episodes, follow Local 514 on YouTube and follow CUTV Montreal on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks so much. See you next time.